I came into Kingston from St. Elizabeth and lived at, let's put it this way, I first lived at Maxfield Avenue, and then I lived at Delacree Road. And that was my entry into Kingston, and I then got into Halfway Tree Primary School. Getting used to what was on the radio at the time, I was listening to things like Pat Boone, Sam Cooke, at those early age. However, my first Jamaican influence of music came from a young singer called Jimmy Tucker, who whose family, along with his I think his brother was called Desmond, and that was our first influence of hearing a Jamaican singer. Owen Gray and Wilfred Jackie Edwards. Those were some of the folks that was the first influence. But then my early influence was seeing Jimmy Tucker, because he had come to my house as a young kid, and I'm hearing this kid sing, and he was singing the Lord's Prayer, because my aunt, who went to Lyndhurst Methodist Church, had invited him over. Yes. Involved in that group at that time was I call Errol Kong, Norris Weir, Martin Williams, Jerry Brown, and there was another brother there in that group. Aston McEachran was an American, and we met him. His girlfriend had invited us to sing at her home for her while they have dinner. And McEachran was this guy who, I think he was part owner of the Jamaica producer, The Ship, and this guy was like, we were just in awe, because this guy came down with his own Cadillac, and so we decided to sing for him while he was having dinner with his girlfriend. And when we were finished, they gave us shandy to drink, which was a soft drink mixed with beer. And he said, fellas, I tell you this, you guys should call yourselves the Jamaicans. And I thought immediately, that's salt. Who can call themselves the Jamaicans? And we are the Miracles, happy sounding guys, because I guess those were the days when happy people were about, the gay lads. I don't know if they could call themselves that now, but and the heptones and whatever the names were emerging at the time. So he said to us one day, very prophetically, that the Jamaican music will become big all over the world, and you guys should be first to be identified with it. So I would suggest now that you call yourselves the Jamaicans. And, we decided to call ourselves the Jamaicans, continued. I mean, of course, later on, people emerged like the Clarendonians. Again, we thought it was, what a salt name, Anyway, so that's how come we gave ourselves the name, the Jamaicans. Bob Andy, who I call Keith, because that was what I knew him as first. I knew him before singing days, actually. I didn't put much emphasis on when somebody started to sing or who we knew or whatever, but I was living at Delacree Road that time, and in the evenings we would go to Maxfield Park, which was a cricket field, football field, and Maxfield Park was big. There was actually a shed in Maxfield Park that had a piano underneath it. And we would gather in the evenings and just to hear guys trying to, knock out a song, and they would always be playing pam pa dum pa tam 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 pa. And a few evenings, Keith would be over there, and also John Holt would be over there. But before that, on the playground, now Keith, as far as I was concerned that time, would come over. He was able to come over from Maxfield Park Children's Home, and always wondered why he, maybe only him alone, was able to come across. So we figured, is he a child at the Maxfield Park Children's Home or not? But he would come across and he would play cricket because he was a very good spin bowler. And that was what we knew about him first, his ability to play cricket. And so we knew him as Keith. When I actually realized that he could sing was really a shocker to me a few years down the line. And if I may just fast forward a little bit here, was that John Holt and all these guys, now we grew up in that area, like I said, where we knew of the Jimmy Tuckers and so forth, but then we knew of Wilfred Jackie Edwards, and John Holt was like a little guy living down Maxfield Avenue, and he was what we call a tearjerker, who would sing, sometimes I cry when I'm lonely, sometimes I cry when I'm blue. And so what really happened, when we became the Jamaicans, like I say, fast forward, and we were doing a show with the Mighty Vikings, and we turned up for a rehearsal. It was at some school downtown Kingston. And we heard that the Paragons were now on the show with us. We didn't pay that much mind, but to tell you the truth, we rehearsed, and I decided to stay back and watch the Paragons just a little bit. And I was shocked out of my mind. I was trembling, because what were we going to do with this kind of a harmony that this group was carrying? And of course, it was Howard Barrett. Howard Barrett, Tyrone, Keith, and John Holt. That the four of them turned up for that session. I was aware of Barrett before, because Barrett would sing with his friends Fuzzy and these guys, and he just had a wonderful voice. And I knew Tyrone Evans from other friends over by Vineyard Town. But that was the first time now that I was actually aware of Bob Andy, not Bob Andy, of Keith being the singer. You know something? Crossing paths with him at Studio One, because my impression of Keith at that time was that I did not actually know him as a producer. I later on knew that he had some association with like Jackie Me Too, and of him being a writer. I thought at the time when he was there, he was more like a salesman, because Cox and Dodd, Mr. Dodd, would, I always found it even strange from those days, would go in the studio, produce the songs, and then he himself was out there selling the songs. So when we knew of him, of Bob as being some kind of assistant, we thought then Bob was mainly into the selling of the product on the road. I mean, all that happened until we heard this, what I call national anthem that Bob did there, called I've Got to Go Back Home. And it actually like almost brought Jamaica music industry to a stop, because this was, this song was, like I said, an anthem. This song was bringing an appeal for me to the dancer, to the dance hall, to the parties, where this guy, for me, and that sound was like crying out. It was a sound of crying out, I've got to go back home. And as a youngster, you're still trying to understand because I guess our background was almost different from the regular person at Studio One and who was coming through the music business with so many people coming out of Trenchtown with a different kind of a philosophy, a different kind of a culture, a different kind of a meaning. And but I've got to go back home sounded um, almost almost like because we had a background of the church. This couldn't be my home. You know, this must be somewhere else. Or, you know, I'd kill myself. And how could you be saying that? But at the same time, people were dancing it and singing word for word on this recording. And so Bob Andy to us came as a kind of a shock in this now as a vocalist. And that was our first big eye opener to Bob Andy. And how would somebody follow up a song like this? I think it was around 1970, around that, between 70 odd, that we were hearing of Young, Gifted and Black with himself and Master Griffiths. But I did not have a daily experience with Bob, only knowing that Bob was then a singer of what must be significance and very renowned at the time, yes.